Groundhog's Day. Misrepresenting information. And fact of the matter is sometimes I'm far too fair. And when I take a look at the recap, I was right in the first place. Sometimes media companies have a tendency to misrepresent information when they don't like a particular candidate. There's a bias associated with it. They don't consider themselves biased, but it comes across in the way they do their jobs. Now, in this case, I'm bringing up MSNBC and I'm bringing up Politico because they've recently misrepresented Skew data in the way that that data is presented to give an impression that it's not accurate. Not necessarily changing the numbers, but changing or skewing the way the information is presented. Welcome to the Soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox, and yes, Groundhog's Day. I did this video once, but at the end of that video, I was far too fair to MSNBC, and I am taking that fairness back, and I'm redoing this video because I was right in my first assertion. Misrepresenting information. If you guys enjoy this content, you find yourself coming back to this channel often, please consider supporting this content through PayPal or Patreon. They demonetize these videos. We like to say even $1 helps, and it gets you access to the patron appreciation content where you can ask a question and suggest content for the video, meaning a title for the video, and a show that we will do on Saturdays. On Sundays. My wife and I do them typically at 2 o'clock. We often say 1, but typically they start at 2 p.m. So let's get into the news. Now, I did a show earlier where I talked about recent polling that just came out showing Sanders and Biden in a commanding lead. Now, MSNBC and Politico, I am flagging these two because these two are presenting this in ways that is not necessarily indicative of reality, and they're giving people a false impression. The majority of people only really look at the title of things. That's the first point. Media companies know this. And the second point is, when people are presenting information to you, they absorb that information in somewhat quick ways and they internalize it. And sometimes just titles and just snapshots come across as actual data and information that those people go along with as if it's real knowledge. Take a look at this to show you what I mean. This is MSNBC. MSNBC is an appendage of the Democratic Party ever as much as Fox News is an appendage of the Republican Party. They may not be as onerous in the way that they deal with information, but they are just as much an appendage, and that should not be forgotten when you are looking at the stuff that they're doing in regard to their analysis of one Mr. Bernie Sanders. Take a look at this. 2020 matchups. Joe Biden, 53% against Donald Trump, 43%. All right, fair enough. Kamala Harris, 48% against Trump, 46%. Elizabeth Warren, 48. Sanders, 49. Buttigieg, 47. Now, when I first looked at this, I said, Joe Biden, all right, if you alphabetically, Buttigieg would be next because Buttigieg is a B and that goes ahead of H. But no, it's not alphabetical. So Buttigieg is at the bottom. And then I thought, well, maybe it's going by the amounts, but then I was wrong on that because Sanders is 49. And 49 beats 48 on both counts. But then I thought to myself, well, maybe they're using the 2% difference to put Kamala Harris in second place. But then my problem here is that Bernie Sanders would be in third place, even under that model, because 49% and the 1% difference would be the 0 difference with Warren. What methodology did they use to put this chart together? Did they just randomly throw names on a board? And is that how it's typically done, randomly throwing names on a board? Aren't they typically ordered in some particular fashion? How did Sanders end up in this spot? He should at the least, at worst, be at third place and ideally be at second place with the 49% support. I don't understand it, and yet there it is. My skepticism here that this is not just random comes from one Mr. Ed Schultz. Ed Schultz is no longer with us, but Ed Schultz was a lion on MSNBC at one point. And listen to what Ed Schultz says about how he was directed into what he could talk about, the boundaries of what he could talk about, how the shows themselves were directed, that he could not control the content. For the most part, they might have had a little bit of leverage, but journalistic input for the most part came from people who were above him.
More than anything I am exposed to here at RT America.
Did he tell you what to say? Did he tell you an angle to take?
Often. In fact, when Bernie Sanders was announcing that he was going to be a candidate for the nomination of the Democratic Party in Burlington, Vermont, I was the only cable host between Fox, MSNBC, and CNN that was there live to cover it. Now, there were live cameras there, but we had coordinated with the Sanders campaign that at 5 o'clock he was going to make his announcement, and we were going to cover this on the Ed Show. I go to Bernie Sanders' house that afternoon, an interview in the backyard, about a 15-minute interview. The grandkids are running around. It's a big day for the Sanders family. He's going to announce that he's running for president. We're going to carry it live later on in the day, and we're going to run this one-on-one tape with Bernie. 3,000 people are there on Lake Champlain. It's 5 minutes to air, and I get a phone call from Phil Griffin. You're not covering this. I said, Phil, Bernie Sanders is announcing he's running for president. He's going to be a president. I don't care. You're not covering this. And it got rather contentious. And
Why though?
I don't, well, now you're asking me for opinion. I'm giving you fact right now about what happened. Mm-hmm. And other people who were there with me will attest to the fact and back me up that this is what happened. We were told that we had to cover something down in Texas that was totally meaningless, and another press conference in Baltimore, which was already had been in the news for a few days.
Schultz goes further and makes the point that he thinks that part of the reason that he was fired was because of his wanting to cover Sanders. That his wanting to put Sanders and bring it on the show, do this introduction and carry content associated with Sanders was part of the reason that he lost his job at MSNBC. Take a look at this. Here's another one. This is Politico. What did I do with the article? All right. So this is Politico. And for some reason I closed this article. Alright. I'm sorry guys. I did this video once, closed the article after I did the video and I was massively dissatisfied with it. And so I'm doing this again. Alright. So take a look at this article. Harris and Warren top at third place in new 2020 poll, but Biden still leads. Who are they not saying? Who are they not saying? They are struggling, turning themselves into pretzels to not say Bernie Sanders. Now, the poll that they're talking about is the poll that I went over a little bit earlier that had, let's see, Jesus Christ. All right, here we are. The poll they're talking about is this: 29% to 23%. Elizabeth Warren and Kamala Harris are at a distant third place at 11%. This article is bending over backwards to not say Bernie Sanders, when the real story here is that Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders continue to be in a commanding lead. Nobody comes close. Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren, it is technically true that they're in third place, but the reality of it is they are in a distant third place. You would think that using Bernie Sanders' name in this would be more apt to give people a better version of reality about what is taking place in the Democratic primary. My point is, they're struggling not to say Sanders when Sanders is in a commanding second place. It's not even close. It's not even close. Now, you could say that this is an accident. You could say that they're, Yeah, Jamal, but technically Kamala Harris and Elizabeth Warren are in third place. And I will tell you that based on stuff that has taken place in the past, I am extraordinarily skeptical that these things are accidental. And it seems that media organizations, especially those organizations that are more tenured towards establishment, politics, and politicians, trend toward the side of not liking Sanders. And regardless of what they say, it oozes out of them. You made a headline where you leave out Bernie Sanders when Bernie Sanders is in a commanding second place, and you bring up two people who are in a distant third place. Are you serious? Are you serious? I'm going to end this. I don't want this one to be long. I just kind of wanted to point this out. Shwari Kate, Jamarl Thomas, thank you for mentioning Ed Schultz, saying his name and mention MSNBC. Fix is in often. Yes, I think the fix is in often on MSNBC. They have their established candidates. I think that's what that literally boils down to. And Ed Schultz saying that is somewhat of a big deal. Ed Schultz worked at NBC. He was there at MSNBC. And he saw that what was being put out as content wasn't necessarily entirely directed by the people who were just journalists. Meaning you saw the face on the show, but that face on the show has a lot of guidance to it that you don't necessarily see. Polls. Also, the polls doesn't have demographic breakdown beyond Democrat, Republican, Independent. Yes, other. It doesn't break down by race, age, or income as much as age or CNN, the polling company, use SSR bothers to collect the data. Yes, that's true. The last CNN poll that was done, and this is a different polling company, but the last CNN poll was done, essentially kind of just used people who were older and used some kind of calculation in order to generate some kind of so it's like using an equation to come up with the secondary part for the youth vote. It's like, come on, that looks dicey. The elderly vote tends to trend towards Joe Biden, meaning if you have a poll that skews that way, the poll is going to skew towards Joe Biden. I don't know the breakdown on this poll, but I would say Sanders is in a commanding second place. And Sanders and Biden all gained ground in this poll from the last poll that they did back in April. And so, if you want to give a story, the story of two people who are in a distant third seems to be the less important aspect of this. That's the point that I'm trying to make in the political thing. So I'll end this here. I didn't want this one to be long, but if you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the PayPal or Patreon. Thanks, guys. I hated that last video, and at the end of the video I was looking at the polling again and I was like, wait a minute, MSNBC doesn't get a pass on this. They still get it wrong even if you give them a break for the 2-point thing. So yeah, MSNBC, I have no idea what they're doing in regards to this chart. And Politico, try harder to not mention Sanders' name in a poll. And by the way, in that article, Sanders' name was mentioned once. A poll or article where Sanders literally gets a commanding second place and the people are a distant third place by more than 10 points. And he's only mentioned once. Try harder to not mention his name. Try harder. Thanks, all. I'm calling BS out. I'm calling BS on MSNBC and Politico. Have a good one, guys. I'll see you momentarily.